The year is 2029. Elliot leaned back in his chair, gazing at the bustling streets of Manhattan from the 40th floor of the investment firm where he worked as an economic analyst. It was late February, and the financial news had been grim for months. On his desk, a blinking notification from his data dashboard told him the global markets were once again in turmoil. Elliot whispered to himself, "How did we get here?" Pulling up the reports he'd compiled, it was his job to explain to investors why the economy was teetering on the brink of a global recession. He decided to frame the situation in a narrative for the firm's quarterly report. He titled it, "Echoes of the Past. Are we heading toward another Great Recession?" In his report, Elliot began with a comparison to the Great Recession of 2008. Back then, it was the housing market. Subprime mortgages had been bundled into opaque financial instruments, spreading risk like a virus through the global banking system. When the bubble burst, trillions of dollars vanished overnight and the world plunged into chaos. But this time, it wasn't subprime mortgages. It was a combination of new, interconnected crises. By 2026, the tech sector had reached unprecedented heights. Companies built on artificial intelligence, blockchain, and automation had driven exponential growth. However, many were funded by cheap debt and overvalued venture capital. When interest rates rose sharply in 2027 to combat inflation, these companies struggled to refinance, leading to mass layoffs and bankruptcies. Severe climate disasters had wreaked havoc on supply chains. A devastating drought in North America in 2028 led to global food shortages, while record-breaking storms crippled critical ports in Asia. The result, skyrocketing prices for essential goods. Elliot paused, remembering how analysts had downplayed crypto risks for years. By 2025, cryptocurrencies had been integrated into mainstream finance, with banks offering crypto-backed loans and decentralized finance platforms lending to traditional businesses. But when a major cyber attack in 2028 exposed vulnerabilities in blockchain technology, trust evaporated overnight. The crypto market crashed, dragging down financial institutions with it. Rising tensions between major powers had fractured global trade. Sanctions, tariffs, and even cyber skirmishes between the United States and China disrupted manufacturing and energy supplies. Trade wars had escalated into economic isolationism. Elliot drew another parallel, this time to the Great Depression of the 1930s. Back then, the crash had been fueled by speculative stock trading and a lack of safeguards in the banking system. Once the markets collapsed, unemployment soared, and deflation set in as consumers stopped spending. Elliot fast-forward to today, and the world faces a similar loss of confidence. This time, it's driven by an over-reliance on technology and fragile global systems. In 1929, the Dow Jones plunged 89% from its peak. In 2029, the global AI index, tracking the world's largest tech companies, had already fallen 75% since its high in 2027, but there was a key difference. Policymakers today had tools that didn't exist a century ago. Central banks could inject liquidity into markets at the push of a button. Governments could roll out stimulus packages faster than ever before. The question was, would it be enough? Elliot's narrative wouldn't be complete without addressing the social impact. He scrolled through headlines from the past year. Global unemployment surges to 12% amid tech sector collapse. Food riots erupt in South Asia as prices triple, millions withdraw savings after major bank crypto exposure revealed. These aren't just numbers, these are people's lives. He thought of the stories his grandfather used to tell him about growing up during the Great Depression. Soup kitchens, bread lines, and families losing their homes. Now, in 2029, the soup kitchens were virtual, community-led crowdfunding campaigns on decentralized platforms, but the desperation was the same. As Elliot neared the conclusion of his report, he considered whether the world could avert a full-blown depression. Unlike in 1929 or 2008, governments and corporations had already begun to pivot. Central banks were working together to stabilize currencies and inject liquidity into failing markets. Nations were investing heavily in renewable energy and climate adaptation to rebuild supply chains. Regulators had started cracking down on speculative tech and crypto investments, forcing transparency. Elliott history has shown us that recessions are inevitable, but so is recovery. The key is how quickly we adapt to the challenges we face. He ended the report with a cautious note. Elliott. The events of 2029 are not a repeat of 1929 or 2008, but a new chapter in economic history. Whether it becomes a cautionary tale or a story of resilience depends on the decisions we make today. Satisfied with his work, Elliott hit send and leaned back in his chair. Outside his window, the city buzzed with life, oblivious to the looming crisis. But Elliott felt a flicker of optimism. Just as his grandfather's generation had rebuilt after the Great Depression, he believed this generation would rise to the challenge, and perhaps, just perhaps, they'd do it faster.